The unraveling of Port Charles, a storm of secrets and betrayal. Port Charles, New York. The air in Port Charles on this looming Friday was thick and heavy, charged with an unspoken static that precedes a violent summer storm. It was a tension felt not in the atmosphere, but in the brittle smiles, the conversations cut short, and the haunted looks exchanged in the corridors of General Hospital and across the polished tables of the Metro Court. For those who had seen the city's cycles of chaos and heartbreak, the signs were unmistakable, and no one recognized the scent of a brewing tempest quite like Tracy Quartermaine. Tracy, a matriarch forged in the crucible of family warfare and corporate intrigue, had seen enough chaos to last a dozen lifetimes. Her instincts, honed by decades of navigating the treacherous waters of her own kin, were screaming. The epicenter of this burgeoning storm was a fragile, volatile triangle of hearts. Harrison Chase, the man struggling to do right, Brooklyn Quartermaine, the woman trying to build a future on shaky ground, and Lulu Spencer, a specter of the past whose return was proving to be less a miracle and more a slow-motion catastrophe. Tracy observed the situation with the sharp, discerning eye of a grandmaster watching a chess game turn deadly. She noted Lulu's increasingly erratic behavior, the flashes of manic energy followed by vacant stares, the possessive way her gaze lingered on Chase, the growing tension that crackled in the air whenever she and Brooklyn occupied the same space. This was not merely the awkwardness of a complicated reunion. This was the precursor to an explosion. She knew she had to intervene. Pulling Chase aside with her trademark, no-nonsense tone that could strip paint from a wall, Tracy didn't mince words. "You're walking into a minefield, Chase," she warned, her voice low but piercing. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the dutiful loyalty warring with a desperate desire for the simple happiness he'd found with Brooklyn. "And from where I'm standing, you're about to step on every single landmine. This isn't just about two women vying for your attention. This is dangerous." What appeared on the surface as a petty rivalry between two strong-willed women was, in truth, something far more sinister. At its core, Lulu was unraveling. Her recovery, a journey that should have been a path to healing, had instead become a twisted labyrinth of obsession. She was fixated on rewriting her role in Brooklyn's life, not as a friend or a peripheral figure, but as the rightful center of Chase's world. Her inability to process the profound emotional trauma of her past was manifesting as a destructive need to reclaim a life that no longer existed. This obsession was a ripple effect, and the waves were beginning to crash against the foundations of everyone's sanity. Brooklyn, on the other hand, was desperately trying to maintain composure. She was fighting to prove she could be both a loving partner to Chase and a stable mother figure, all while managing her own inner demons and the constant, unnerving presence of the woman her partner once loved. But Tracy could see the cracks forming. Every time Lulu lashed out with a backhanded compliment or a disruptive, calculated appearance, Brooklyn grew more defensive, more reactive. The poised, confident woman was becoming emotionally frayed, her nerves stretched to their breaking point. And in the middle of it all was Chase, a man slowly losing control not only of the situation but, more perilously, of himself. He was the would-be peacekeeper, trying to shield everyone from harm. He felt an undeniable pull of compassion for Lulu, the woman he had once cherished, especially as her instability became more pronounced. Yet, his heart belonged to Brooklyn. Tracy's warning wasn't just about Lulu's fragility. It was about the crushing weight of responsibility Chase was placing on his own shoulders, a weight that threatened to break him. He couldn't be the hero for everyone, especially not at the cost of his own peace of mind. But with every passing moment, his own emotional balance was teetering on the brink. A different kind of war. While the Quartermaine-Spencer Chase drama threatened to boil over, another, colder war was being waged in the shadows of Port Charles, a war of information, betrayal, and long-buried truths. This battle centered on Trina Robinson, a young woman who was discovering that the past is never truly gone, it merely lies in wait. Trina's world, which had always been painted in shades of caution, had been irrevocably altered. Kai's betrayal had been a devastating blow, not just a personal heartbreak, but a strategic disaster. He had shared sensitive, private information with Drew Cain, a man whose ambition was as vast as his resources. The information wasn't just gossip, it was a key to a past that Trina was only beginning to understand, a past connected to a mysterious figure named Jacinda, whose return Drew seemed intent on controlling. Drew Cain had always known how to exploit weakness, to twist truths into narratives that served only him. He was a powerful opponent, cunning and well-resourced. With Jacinda's mysterious return on the horizon, his obsession with control had found fresh oxygen. He had already begun making subtle moves in court, leveraging facts he shouldn't have known to reshape public perception. He was feeding media outlets selective truths, aiming to bury his own sins and frame Jacinda as unstable and untrustworthy. Now, with Kai acting as his eyes and ears, Drew had an advantage that shifted the entire game. But what Drew didn't count on was the storm his betrayal would ignite inside Trina. This was no longer the same girl he might have once overlooked. This was a woman forged in fire and loss. The betrayal had opened her eyes to the lengths her enemies would go to reclaim control, and it had reminded her that trust, once broken, could become the most dangerous weapon of all. Trina refused to let another woman be destroyed by the same machine that had nearly broken her. She rallied her allies, Jocelyn, who had learned that truth was often a blade hidden behind a smile, Spencer, who had seen firsthand the cost of betrayal, and even Ava, whose sharp instincts and unapologetic pragmatism made her an invaluable weapon in times like these. Together, they began crafting a counterstrike. If they couldn't stop Drew legally, they would unravel him socially. They started leaking misinformation, baiting Drew into traps, and planting seeds of doubt within his own network. The battle for Jacinda's truth was only just beginning. The weight of legacy. The tendrils of these conflicts reached deep into the heart of Port Charles's most powerful families. Sonny Corinthos, ever the patriarch, found himself besieged. On one hand, the situation with his former daughter-in-law, Lulu, was a source of profound concern. On the phone, his face was a mask of grim determination. He sensed the danger and the emotional powder keg waiting to detonate. On the other hand, the specter of Drew Cain's maneuvering and his alliance with figures like Sidwell threatened the stability he had fought so hard to maintain for his family. Laura Collins, as both mayor and mother, felt the pressure from all sides. Her conversation with Lulu was heartbreaking. As she sat across from her daughter in the quiet of the Spencer home, she saw the shadows of a painful family legacy looming larger than ever. Their talk, meant to be a check-in between mother and daughter, quickly evolved into something deeper, something darker. The name Sonny came up, and with it, the weight of generations of Corinthos history. Lulu, still wrestling with her place in the web of power, protection, and pain that surrounded Port Charles, seemed to fixate on the idea that Sonny, always the protector, was somehow part of the chaos that was closing in on her. This was a world that had consumed her family, defined her childhood, and now threatened to swallow her whole as an adult. Lulu wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for clarity, or perhaps control, in a life that felt increasingly dictated by the decisions of men like Sonny. Meanwhile, a different kind of parental nightmare was unfolding across town. Rocco, a boy who had grown up under the protective, if complicated, eyes of Lulu and Dante, had always been more observant than anyone in his family gave him credit for. He had learned to detect the subtle pauses in their conversations, the way their expressions would tighten every time someone mentioned Brit or the past. He had asked questions, polite at first, then persistent, but the answers never came. Instead, there were half-smiles, vague reassurances, and diversions to safer topics. At first, Rocco accepted these deflections as part of the adult world he wasn't supposed to understand. But as he matured, those evasions started to gnaw at him. He sensed there was something deeply wrong, a fundamental truth that had been kept from him for years. And now, he couldn't unfeel the weight of that omission. The catalyst came quietly, as most seismic shifts in a young person's life do. Rocco overheard a late-night argument between Dante and Lulu, heated, desperate, and full of words not meant for his ears. Britt's name came up. So did phrases like real mother, she had a right to know, and we should have told him sooner. Rocco froze outside the doorway, the world suddenly spinning in a different direction. His pulse quickened, his mouth went dry, and the reality he had always trusted cracked wide open. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every moment of his childhood recontextualized, every memory now suspect. By the next morning, he had made his decision. He packed a small bag, just essentials, some clothes, the cash he had secretly saved, a few photos, and a notebook where he had written down details he remembered from past conversations, subtle hints, and timelines that never made sense. He didn't leave a note, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want another excuse or half-truth. He needed answers, real ones, and he needed to find them on his own terms. When Lulu walked into Rocco's room and found the bed empty, the window slightly ajar, and his backpack gone, a primal scream ripped from her chest. Panic surged through her veins. Her fingers trembled as she called Dante, who was already driving over, a sixth sense having told him something was off after their tense conversation the night before. Within minutes, both parents were in the house, the silence between them now replaced by frantic whispers and tearful realizations. They had known this day might come. They just hadn't expected it so soon. Tipping points and a future in flux. This is where all the threads began to tighten, to twist, and to threaten to snap. The city was a pressure cooker, and every character was at a tipping point. Trina, no longer willing to be a passive victim, confronted Kai, not in public, but in a private confrontation that would haunt him for days. She demanded answers, exposed what she knew, and let him see the raw pain in her eyes. It wasn't just that Kai had shared information about Jacinda's return. It was that he had done so behind closed doors, in whispered conversations and cryptic messages that Trina was never meant to discover. And when she did, it felt like the floor had collapsed beneath her feet. In the aftermath, a quiet, cold fury settled over Trina. This was a woman who had allowed Kai into her world, allowed herself to hope, and now that hope had been turned into a weapon in Drew's hands. Anna Devane, ever the strategist, knew this was more than just teenage rivalry. It was psychological warfare. Visiting Emma, she found her granddaughter a shadow of her former self, curled in the farthest corner of the couch, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes glazed as if her mind was 1,000 miles away. That alone told Anna everything she needed to know. She promised Emma they would not ignore this. She would dig deeper. If Jocelyn was spiraling, if her unresolved grief over Morgan or her anger towards Sunny was manifesting in cruelty toward Emma, then it had to be stopped. Not just for Emma's sake, but for Port Charles itself. The episode on Friday, July 11th, promises not resolution, but escalation. The emotional powder keg is set to detonate. Chase stands at a crossroads, forced to make a choice that will inevitably cause heartbreak. Trina, now a warrior, prepares to face a formidable foe, knowing the cost of failure could be immeasurable. Sunny and Laura, the patriarch and the matriarch, struggle to protect their families from forces both internal and external. And somewhere, a young boy named Rocco is on a mission to find the truth, a truth that could either save his family or shatter what little remains of their fragile peace. The storm has arrived in Port Charles, and when the skies finally clear, no one will be left unscathed. Thanks for watching this videos. Please hit the subscribe button for more updated news.